Okay. Okay.
All right, give me 1 second. Sometimes I like to start off the podcast with just a really hard hitting question. And Danielle, I'm sorry to put you on the spot. This is your first time on the Mortuary Show, and I'm gonna hit you with a hard one right off the bat. So if you need to take a minute to answer it, it's totally fine. Danielle, what would you say the best state in the United States is?
Oh, the best state in
Come
the United. You
on,
know, I
come
think I'm gonna have to
on.
go with Iowa.
Yeah.
Iowa. It's a toss-up though because I left some of my dearest friends down in Texas. So, but I'm gonna have to go with Iowa.
Yes, that is the correct answer for everyone listening.
Good.
That is the correct answer. Oh my goodness. I Danielle is the CEO of the Iowa Funeral Directors Association. I myself an alumni of the University of Iowa, so I have a special tie, and it is my favorite state too. Don't tell the people from Illinois that though. That's for sure.
You just did.
Ah, damn it. So Danielle, tell us a little bit about, you've been all over the place in every aspect of funeral service, and I think it's going to be a really fun conversation for people that are looking to dip their toe or are in the funeral industry, but maybe don't want to be specifically a quote unquote funeral director. There are so many different avenues, and you've been all over the place. You've done so many different these different things, so I think it's going to be super valuable for people to understand and hear your story and how you got to where you are now. And so yeah, just give me a little bit about, I guess, right now what you're doing, and then we could jump around your whole career in funeral service. So, what are you doing right now with your association, and how'd you get there?
Yeah, so I'm the CEO and executive director for the association. I've been here for about 18 months. My first day was convention of 2022, and
Nice.
very fast whirlwind to get here. But I was previously at Park Lawn and was down in Houston, and really just wanted to come back home to this amazing state of Iowa
That's
and
right.
right and see my kiddos. And so this job presented itself, and I had to take a long look because it's a different aspect than what I'm used to,
Sure.
and a lot of legislative things,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things that were probably not in my wheelhouse, and some of them I've had to learn along the way, and I'm fortunate that I've been able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is where I am now and tend to stay. So, but just a lot of education things,
Sure.
a lot of legislative work. We also have a master trust that we oversee, and we're here to answer the questions when funeral directors have them, and bring good things to them as far as benefits when we can.
Yeah, the associations are such an imperative part of what we do as funeral directors. Every funeral director is a part of one or multiple different associations. It's the way we get our education, it's the way we connect with other people, and it's a good way to be part of our small community as funeral directors and people in funeral service. And the associations are all part of that. And I encourage, if you haven't gone outside of your little association that you're part of as a funeral director or in funeral service, and go out there and try these different places and different things, because you can learn a lot. I've already learned a good amount myself just going to different conventions outside of my own standard one that I've been doing for 10 years. It's good to expand those horizons and be a part of these associations, because they're important for what we're doing now and the future, because we know how rapidly evolving our industry is, and so we gotta stay on top of that. So tell us your story. What happened? How'd you even get dip your toe into funeral service? Because it's a rare thing. It's a rare thing.
Yeah, especially for somebody that doesn't come from a
Yeah.
funeral background as far as family, and so it goes back to high school, just a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah.
It goes back to high school when I took an aptitude test, and that aptitude test said my first career choice should be a funeral director, and
And you were
um,
sold.
Oh, yeah, no. I said, oh, hell no, I'm not going to do that. And so, ironically, fast forward several years later, after the loss of my father, there was just something that kind of kept tapping me on the shoulder that this was something that I wanted to do, didn't really know why.
Yeah.
And ended up working in pre-need for several years,
Mhm.
actually. And then kind of migrated through marriage and things like that into working in a funeral home,
Mhm.
and in 2006 became a celebrant. And that was also that was a funeral home that actually called and said, we want you to go to Insight Books and get certified as a celebrant. And I'm like, oh, hell no, because there's no
Again.
way. I'm like, I can write the eulogy, but there is just no way that I'm going to stand out in front of people that I don't know and deliver this eulogy. And so, but I went and did that, and I've probably done close to about 200 funerals
Beautiful.
since then. And so I guess I keep saying, oh, hell no, and then I end up doing it anyway. But so I did that, and then owned and managed a monument company, and that was a very unique experience, and
I'm
almost
sure.
uh, one that you get to kind of at the tail end of it all sit with the family and say, let's create that one final piece
Yeah.
that is the piece that you're going to be looking at when you
Hmm.
go to the cemetery. And so let's get this right. I don't care if we sit here for 4 hours trying to design something and you come back 10 more times. Let's get it right. and
Absolutely.
and so I love doing that. And again, it was outside of my wheelhouse as far as design, but I enjoyed it and got to meet some really, really amazing people. And then in 2015, I got a call from a friend that was working at Aurora
Hmm.
Casket and said, we have the perfect job for you. And I said, all right, tell me about it.
Your first time you ever
And
said "all right"?
yeah, I did say, well, no, I said to him, I'm like, why are you even calling me? Because when he would call and say, what are you doing? It was like, is that a good question or a bad question? Because you just never knew what you were going to get. So
Sure.
um, I said, he asked me what I was doing. I said, why? What do you want to, why? Why is it any of your business? But uh, anyway, so I interviewed with a very well, friend of mine now, wasn't a friend at the time. I knew
Hmm.
who he was, Bill Hudson, and that was about it. And I was on board with Aurora, and I was actually their program development manager. So I went out and
Oh,
worked with
cool.
funeral homes across the United States to develop community programs, and
Oh,
working with hospice, assisted living, the Alzheimer's Association, anything that we could kind of dip our toe into with the
yeah,
community that would strengthen that relationship.
yeah.
So I spent a lot of time on an airplane
Sounds like it.
traveling to every state that we were in.
And you still couldn't find a topper to Iowa after all those
I
travels.
didn't no, and I could list all the states I've been to, and I found some really fantastic people in every state and some really
Yeah,
fantastic things about every state, but I was still the best.
absolutely. I'd love to talk about each aspect, if you don't mind, about what you've what you've gone through, and where you've been. So, I guess we could start at the beginning. What was your life like doing pre-need sales, and were you at a specific funeral home, or did you bounce around a little? And what was that like for you, and what were some of the highs and lows of that? Because I think that's something that a lot of people, maybe if you don't want to be involved in the prep room, like a lot of states, you don't have that split license, like you have to do both. And I think pre-need is a good way to get your foot in the door like you did, and have that connection with families, and build out that ideal farewell for someone while they're still here. So maybe tell us a little bit about how you enjoyed that, and what were some of the highs and lows, being in that aspect of funeral service.
Yeah, that was really my first exposure to funeral service without going to a funeral. And
Had to learn a lot, I
uh,
imagine.
yeah, so I worked directly with the funeral homes versus working with the families, and
Hmm.
so really was my job to go in and represent a product, um, and since you're going to edit this, I will tell you. I was like, oh, I don't want to talk about this, but I was with a company that is no longer, and
Okay.
uh, did some bad things, but I didn't do the bad thing. I happened to take notice of a couple of things and turned them in Iowa. So that was probably the worst part of that job, was
Yeah.
having to go to my funeral homes, and I talked pretty candidly about it. Always
Yeah.
have, and
Smart.
I went to the state and said, I think there's something wrong. And I went to every one of my funeral directors that I was working with and said, there's a problem.
Something's
And
off. Yeah.
actually resigned that day.
Yeah. Good for you.
And I don't like to focus on that, but
Yeah.
I think that, I think for me, starting in that pre-need world and the aspect that I did allowed me to get to know the funeral directors. It allowed me to see the business, um, definitely from the outside as somebody working with them, but tiptoeing a little bit into their world, as far as I was not afraid to, if they needed help on a service, I showed up. If they
Yeah.
needed help with flowers, I showed up.
Wow.
Um, and so I really got a lot of exposure. And I worked with some amazing funeral directors here in Iowa that
Yeah.
took me under their wing a little bit and said, "We'll show you what you want to know." And one of those funeral homes actually called me and said, um, "Will you become a celebrant for us?" And I
Yeah.
really had no idea what that was. And I looked into it, and I said, I just, again, I was like, "Oh, hell no, I don't think I can do this."
Yeah.
And I went, and I actually was, I think, in the last class that Doug Manning and Glenda taught together,
Mm-hmm.
which is incredible, and went through that certification and came back 3 weeks later, did my first service. And but so those two things, the pre-need and that, really kind of exposed me to funeral service, and I
Right.
just fell deeper and deeper in love with it, I guess,
Yeah.
and what it all meant, and how I could do my little tiny part.
Yeah. Absolutely. What would you say was the most unique service that you were ever a part of, or something that was a little bit different that you did during your celebrant work?
Well, if this was, live and you could see my pictures, but probably the best one that I've ever done is I dressed up like a clown. So,
No
uh,
kidding.
no, yeah, so it was
Tell
pretty
us.
incredible. It was, the gentleman was Doodles the clown, and he was a clown for the Shriners, and lifelong shrine clown. And so I did a service, and the several of the clowns came down to the service along with the potentate and everybody. They were there, and I'm like, you know what? I think I need to just make this a little unique and interesting. So
No
during the
way.
last song that was being played, two of the clowns that were there took me out and got me dressed. I mean, I wasn't completely dressed up, but I had the nose and the hat and the
Yeah.
big bow tie and everything, and came back out to do the rest of the service dressed as a clown.
That's
And
amazing.
ended the service, and then all of us, that the clowns and the potentate, came out to the front of the chapel. And
You
now we didn't
played.
really have alcohol in the glasses, but we just toasted, the camel's milk, and we did a toast, to Doodles the clown, and that's how we ended the service. And
So cool.
uh, for me, it was, it, it was just giving back to the family, the life, the story, the
Yeah.
things that mattered. And I'm not dismissing anybody that wants the scriptures and the religious
No,
service by any
no.
means, but that that humanistic touch to a service is so important, because we get 30 to 45 minutes to talk about somebody's life
Right.
and what they meant to us, and to put a smile on our face, to say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I had that person there. And
Yeah.
so for me, that, though, being able to do those services, and I still do them now every once in a while, just not like I used to,
Yeah.
to be able to give that little piece at the end of it all, to say, this was your loved one, and I'm not reading your obituary, I'm creating a story,
Yeah.
was is and still, or was and still is, so incredibly important.
Yep.
And so that was probably the most unique one.
Yeah.
Not to say, I've done other ones that were probably equally crazy, but
Yeah, did you, as they're passing by the final casket, did you make them play Bozo Buckets to get out the
I
door?
should have. I should have. I should have. And it was, and the wife came rushing out of her chair after the service, and I didn't really, and she was fragile, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what, I couldn't tell if she was angry because she just was rushing at me. And she just wrapped her arms around me and she said, that was the
Oh,
most beautiful service. And,
wow.
and, um, she said, please promise me that you'll do my service, which I did about 3 years later.
Oh my gosh, how
Yeah,
cool.
so and I think for me too was, and that's just that empathetic side of me.
Yeah,
I've done, I don't know, 200 and some funerals, and I've only ever known two people.
that's
I've known the
unbelievable.
rest I did not know.
Yeah,
So
you got to make it personable. You have to make it about that person, and that's what you did, and that's so amazing. And
yeah,
clearly, you touched them. I guess I have questions about it. Was he dressed in his clown outfit or uniform? I suppose in the casket.
no,
Okay, I have a story. I have a
which
story
I
for
think
you.
would have been great. Yeah, but
I have a story. This was going probably 5 6 years ago at this point. I'm at the funeral home, and we get a call, and it's an older woman, and she said my son passed away. Can you help assist us? We're like, of course, whatever you need. And she says I have some interesting odd requests. And I was like, okay, well, whatever you need, we can take care of. And she said my son was a professional clown, and we were like, oh, okay, like whatever you need, we can help you out. And she's like, okay, I want him to be dressed in his full clown uniform. I said, okay, that's no problem. They give us the clothing, and we'll do whatever you have to do. And she's like, okay, like that would be great. I also want him in clown makeup. Have you ever done that? We're like, not quite, but I could run over to Party City, and I could touch up some clown makeup. And she said, okay, great. I'm glad. We'll give you a photo. We can do everything you need. And she's like, I have a couple more, or I have one more interesting request. We're like, okay, like whatever you need. And she said, I would like him to have a full open couch, so the entire casket, open, like you
yeah.
would have a lot of times for you'd see it for priests or whoever else. And we said, sure, we can do that. And may we ask why? And she's like, well, he's got to have his 2 foot clown shoes on, so they're sticking out the bottom of the casket.
Yes.
We said, sure, we could do that for you. Ended up she must have gone elsewhere. Maybe I was too excited on the phone to be able to, to do this for them, but it was a very unique, interesting request that we had from a family. And it's so funny that you actually dealt with a situation like that before. And it's one of those things where you'll do whatever it takes to make a family happy, and that seems like that's
Oh
your
yeah.
mentality too.
I mean, I've put on dreadlocks and you name
Oh,
it. I mean, it's whatever, just to find something a little unique about
yeah,
that person and to be able to deliver that and do that and help them to, just the grief's going to be there. But I always say it's okay to be happy. It's okay to laugh.
yeah,
You have this wonderful person in your life, and I know when I started out as a celebrant, it really was just individuals like myself that were like, oh, I want to do this. Well, I didn't really want to do it. The funeral home kind of bribed me into it. um, but I think now the way that Insight Books is approaching the value of being a celebrant isn't always just somebody like me that is the celebrant, but it's now also there's a lot of funeral directors that are going through that
training.
certification
Yep.
to understand the value of a celebrant, and it makes them. I've had several funeral director friends say it's made me a better funeral director. It's helped me to meet with families better because I ask better questions. I ask different questions,
Right.
and I know that there are times when if I meet with the family first as the celebrant,
Hmm.
I get a lot of information to be able to take back to the funeral director for the obituary,
Yeah.
to just kind of help guide the service in a way that it helps the funeral home to stand out too, to say, hey, this is what we can do for you. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to be this cookie cutter service that you think it is. And there's so many people that have a view of a funeral that isn't what it is. It
Exactly.
might be what it was at one time,
Yeah.
but it's not what it is now.
No.
And so I think that's where the celebrant, and the funeral directors who go through that training or that certification can really begin to develop us that those humanistic services, um, that that the consumer is wanting these days.
Right. I think we're moving more and more continuously towards that trend where we're doing things that are a little bit more unique, and it's more of a celebration. Um, it's more like a wedding in some respects, where you're doing things that are not just how they were done a long time ago. And I think funeral directors and funeral homes specifically, that's a way to distinguish yourself in the community, because imagine if you're someone that was attending that service, didn't matter if they were, related to the clown world at all, they're going to remember that, and they're going to say, I've got to use this funeral home, because who knows what they're going to do for me, because that's what it's all about, is making it about that person that lived that beautiful life, and about those people that are still around to really commemorate them and remember how their life was well lived.
Yeah, I think what for me, and this is what I tell my friends and my family is, when you hear the word funeral, so many people go ooh, but
Yeah.
and oftentimes when a family walks in and says I don't want a funeral, it doesn't mean they don't want a service.
Yep. Yep.
They just, that word funeral has a different meaning to them, and
Yes.
and it's because it's where we were, and so yeah, that was. I will forever do that. Somebody could call me today that I did a service for 10 years ago, and I probably would know who they are, and I
Yeah.
would step up to the plate to do it again.
Yeah. So you would contact them and reach out to them before even arrangements sometimes, or how did that work to get that? And what are some questions that you would ask a family now that maybe us funeral directors could use during arrangements, so we can make our services just that much better for the family?
Yeah, there were times where it was more convenient for me to just kind of step in and meet with the family because it's what worked for them, and they were waiting to get everybody together to go to the funeral home. And
Yeah.
sometimes it was just a phone call. Sometimes I would drive to somebody's house and meet with the whole family. And
Yeah.
whether it was one person or I think my largest group was 18 family
Woo!
members came together. Yeah. And
A lot of
that
input.
one was that was the second service I ever did, and I
Oh
was a little
no.
overwhelmed. Yeah, but you know what? It ended up being really great because I just got really really wonderful stories, and I
Yeah.
think um, I think it's just important when we're sitting with a family is to really say what is it that, because a lot of people approach when they come in, they say, well, this is what mom wanted, or this is what dad wanted, or this is what my loved one wanted. I think that the biggest question we can ask is, what do you need to be able to continue forward?
Yeah.
What is going to make you feel you're still going to grieve, right? We're not trying to dismiss that because that's always going to be there. That's there forever.
Mhm.
Um, it's ebb and flow on that. It just comes and goes. So, how can we help you to, as the survivor, to wake up tomorrow morning and say it's going to be okay?
Yeah.
And I know that people go, well, I just want to do what mom wanted, and I hear that a lot, and it's like, okay, maybe that's just the disposition. What the service is for the survivors, right? The living.
Hmm.
So what can we do to help your journey be okay? So tomorrow when you wake up, you know it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And
I like that.
then, and not so much the, like, I'm not a, and I don't, hopefully you might have to edit this out. um, I'm not a big proponent of real traditional aftercare. I think aftercare isn't me sending a pamphlet that says read this, because we don't know where people are in their journey.
Yeah.
I think aftercare is saying I'm going to be here for you, down the road, even if it's a year from now or 5 years from now. Had a lady come into a funeral home in Texas when I was doing a project down there, and she walked in and she was crying, and I'm sitting there, there's no funeral director in sight, and I'm like, can I help you? And she said, my husband's here. And I said, oh. And I said, did he pass away recently? And she said, no, he died 5 years ago. We had him cremated. And she said, I didn't, I just kept driving by here every day.
Oh,
And I couldn't stop to get him because I didn't know what I was going to do next.
it's heartbreaking.
Right. And so
Yeah.
it's those things. It's saying somebody might not be ready to do something with the cremated remains, but maybe they will be. And so I think finding ways to have that, and I'm use this word loosely, that constant contact, or at least
Right.
some sort of contact with the families to let them know that it's okay, especially with cremation. It's okay if you need some time to decide what you need to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Uh-huh.
it's okay. And I know FDLIC did a study about. I thought this was really unique about if you ask somebody out in the general world, you go up to somebody on the sidewalk and you ask. Well, first of all, if you ask a funeral director, what do you think the average time is from the time somebody dies until the funeral? Most say 3 to 4 days,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because that's what we're used to.
Standard,
If
right.
you go out and you ask the consumer, they're saying 12.
No kidding.
They're saying 12. And so when I think about that, and I think about my own experience with the person closest to me that has died, I've lost a lot of people, but my father is sometimes we're just not completely functioning to be able to make a lot of the decisions that we need to make, or we would make them differently if we had some time to think about it.
Right.
And I know that in cases where you're embalming and you're burying, you don't have that time, which again is why uh, pre-arranging and pre-funding is so important. But I also think that expands another thing to think about is making certain that, like with my mom, I wanted all of us to be present to talk about what she wanted as well as what we needed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I think that those always make the best services is when you find out what one person wants and then what the
They
living is
need.
going to need.
I think all of us that are making arrangements should write that question down. It's an open ended question, and it's up for the family's interpretation how they
Mm-hmm.
want to approach that. And it gives them that safe place for them to answer the question in the manner that they see fit. So it gives them that opportunity and that permission to say, what do you need? I know
Yeah.
what mom or dad or your husband or wife, whatever they wanted, I know what they wanted, but what do you need? It's such a powerful question, and you don't know where that's going to lead you. And that's why that's such a beautiful question, because we can take that and formulate whatever service that they're going to resonate with the most and appreciate the most, because that's who, like you said before, Danielle, that's who we're doing it for. So keeping that open line of communication with them, that is so crucial. And just that's one question. It's not like you have a list of things, and then most of us as funeral directors, despite what the maybe the population thinks, we're very personable people. Like, we know how to have a conversation, how to guide it, and that's one way to kick that off and start giving them that opportunity to open up to you a little bit.
Yeah, I think, and the other thing that I know that I try to do with every family that I met with is I just really bringing my authentic self to the table,
Everything.
and not be I didn't want to pacify them, in their moment of grief, because sometimes that's easily done where you're like, okay, I have these steps that I have to do. I have to ask them these 127 questions and I got to get through this. And you do.
Right.
And again, I go back to the value of pre planning, because a lot of those questions then can get answered.
Yes.
And all that stuff is really great. But just being able to really bring your authentic self to the table and guide those conversations. And I think, if I go back to when I was a celebrant, a little bit more full time,
Yeah.
I think that's where we were able to kind of sometimes people would even change their mind as to what they wanted to do because I asked those questions. I was asking the questions I needed to write a story about their life, to create something memorable for them. And the funeral director, rightfully so, is asking the questions that they need to do in order to perform their duties.
Yeah.
And it can look very different, which again, I go back to why, a funeral director understanding the value of a celebrant and getting some of that information is so important, because I think it changes the way we have conversations.
It's
And
crucial.
So yeah, that's, um, I think they all just go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that a lot of these organizations are starting to partner together to bring a nice package
Yeah.
to the funeral home to say, listen, all of this works together. We're not trying to monopolize your business, but all of these things work together. Whether you use all of my stuff or you say, hey, there's a value in having a celebrant on staff, and there's a value in live streaming, there's a value in all these things. Whether you use my package that has it all, or you look at your options, all of these things work together.
They sure do. They sure do. Really cool. Love that. All right, we're going to transition to your next phase then. You go into a monument company. You own a monument company. How did that come to be, and how was it doing that and owning that, and from a business point of view and from like a personal point of view, what was that all like for you?
Yeah, so I years ago, actually was married to a funeral director, and so it was just kind of, um, I guess, natural. And I helped at the funeral home quite a bit. I did a lot of our services there. I did about 40% of them,
Wow.
and then maybe not quite that high, but 30% of them.
Uh-huh.
And then I he had started a monument shop, and then I was like, okay, let me see what I can do this. I came in, and um, we expanded, and I grew it to a point where we had our own laser machine. We were doing a lot of the
Nice.
work, and I'm 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 a hands-on. Whether I'm managing, I own, whatever it is, I'm very hands-on. And so I said, okay, I want to learn all of it. And I
Yeah.
did. I learned everything from digging the foundations to setting the stones to lasering the stones to doing whatever I had to do with the CAD work, which was crazy
I'm
trying to learn
sure.
that because that is not how my brain works. But I did it anyway, and I loved it. Now, the mad rush of Memorial Day trying to get stones done, and sometimes you're at the mercy of the granite company and things like
uh,
that. Um, but I think that's also setting expectations right away out of the gate with the families that you're working with, that you don't say, yeah, it's going to be here by Memorial Day. You say, we're going to do everything we can to get it here by Memorial Day, but here are the
yep.
factors that come into play
Yeah.
that cause this to have some delays.
Hmm.
And so it's managing the expectations of your families.
Exactly.
And the other thing is, again, I sat there with them on site. I had a big screen behind me and my screen in front of me, and so they could see me actively building their or designing their headstone, and they could say, oh, could you move that here or do this. We could actively do that together until we got to a place where they said, you know what, I think I like that. And sometimes my sales cycle was probably a little bit longer, but um, I I got I got them what they wanted.
Yeah.
Um, and some of the harder ones were when a family was, maybe a second family where it was husband and wife. He had kids, she had kids, and they were adults, and they could just really struggled with each other. And so I had a bucket in front of me, a little tin bucket, and I'd give them a piece of paper, and I would say, I want you to write down two things that are important to you
Okay.
and put them in the bucket. And then I would look, and it was amazing to find out that typically they wanted the same thing. They just wanted to kind of argue a little bit. So just kind of
Right.
sitting with families and saying, okay, you know what, this is that last piece. Let's get it right, but let's make certain that you all have something that you want.
Yeah.
Um, it was physically hard work because there were times I had to go out and set headstones and had to dig the holes, and I learned, when I got really good at driving a dually with a trailer and loaded down with thousands of pounds of granite on it, but I got good at it, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed what I did. I think for me, it's not even about the job that I do;
Mhm.
it's the people that I get to work with
Yeah, I think
that
that's
makes it
everything.
rewarding.
It's everything, and that's why it's nice when you find that funeral home or that company or whatever that might be that has that that family, or a friend, like when you mesh together in the best way. That's what makes being in this industry so much so much more tolerable on those hard days, and it makes it all worthwhile end of the day. And I love that idea about the bucket. I think you really were acting as a funeral director there, because all of us know that we deal with those situations all the time. So the tin bucket is not a bad idea to have in your arrangements room sometime, because some of those families, when they're fighting and they just want to argue because that's how they're coping with it. It
Yep.
happens very frequently, but finding the middle ground, and like we've been saying over and over, it's that open communication, that open line, and it just helps everyone to be on the same page and to move forward. So that's really great. What happened with the company towards the end? I know you moved to Aurora after that. So were you able to sell your company, or did you just let it kind of fly, or what happened?
That 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 went to the other partner,
Gotcha.
and that's fine.
And that's that.
um, yeah, that was a different time in my life. No, and then my friend John reached out to me and said, we have the perfect job for you. And I'd known John for years, and the kind of the crazy story behind that, I was meeting with a gal from hospice,
Mhm.
and I was having coffee with her just to catch up, and she said, I was talking to somebody from Aurora the other day, and they were talking about this kind of service and product that they have. And she said, I thought about you. I thought, man, you would do such a good job with this.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, really? I didn't, I just kind of tossed it to the side.
Yeah.
And so then they approached me, and that was what she was talking about. And so I was like, well, I've heard about it. Tell me more. And again, when John calls and says, what are you doing? You have to ask a few more questions. No, he's a great guy. He's been a great support to me for many years. But he uh, he said, talk to Bill Hudson. He's going to be in Iowa, and I said okay. And so I met with Bill, and um, if he's listening, thank you, Bill, because he went back and said hire her. She's fantastic, and they did. And I had just the most amazing time with my time with Aurora. And even when they merged with, or not merged, but got bought out by Matthews,
Yep.
just really fantastic people. I worked real closely with Mike Lake, who's still with them, and I just probably one of the most meaningful jobs that I had. So I was
Yeah.
their partner development manager for a program they had called Be Remembered. And
Yeah.
we worked a lot with hospice, assisted living. I got deeply involved with the Alzheimer's Association, because that seemed to be a really good place when you're talking to people about remembering their life. Um, those people don't often remember their life, and so how can
Right.
we encourage people to do what they need to do now before something like that happens, if
Yeah.
it happens. And so got really just really embedded with the Alzheimer's Association, so much that I ended up as the co-chair for the Ontario California walk. How that happened, I don't know, but I did. I was out there a lot. I was in California a lot and worked with them a lot. And so being able to bring these programs to organizations that were looking to um, be something different to their community, or to um, just walking into even an assisted living to say, hey, we're going to help you to write your story,
Right.
and we're going to make certain that other people, your loved ones, know about your life. Because when we get ready to do your service, we get 30 minutes to tell it, and that isn't near enough.
No. No.
And so I traveled pretty much all over the United States, and I had a lot of great funeral homes out there that I got to work with, and I hope that they're still doing it. I don't know. And right before I had, uh, right before I left
Hmm.
Matthews Aurora, we were working with Joel Osteen's church, with their director of senior ministries,
Hmm.
to begin to start doing this. So there was things starting to take off right before COVID, and then COVID hit and we couldn't do things anymore.
Sure.
So um, that really for me was just probably one of the most meaningful careers I've had, and I enjoyed working with that group of people immensely.
It sounds like it. So, what was the connection then to Aurora and the caskets then? So, you're doing all of these and you're helping. Was it on the
Mhm.
behalf of funeral homes, or how did that connect to their company? And yeah, what was that? What was that all about?
I think obviously, when they were going through um, their I got to think the word I'm looking for. Anyway, before they were bought out by Matthews,
Mm-hmm.
um, Michael Quinn. This was really Michael Quinn's baby. Was Be Remembered. Him and Marty Strohhofer put together this program called Be Remembered, and really felt like that if we could help. And it was really set up as a hospice program. So
Ah,
they kind of felt like if we could strengthen the relationships between funeral homes and hospices, it would give a better understanding of the value of a funeral director, right? And
yep.
then we could also have those conversations with hospice and say, what can we do better as funeral directors?
Yeah,
And so that's really how it started.
got it.
And um, and because I come in and kind of go, oh, what else can I do? And I really kind of started branching out into some other things that seemed to work really well, and going in and giving really good attention to each client and say, okay, let's take 6 weeks and let's build out some programs and let me help you with this. One of the kind of the more unique areas that we were getting into, again, right before COVID, um, stopped us all in our tracks.
Uh-huh.
We were getting ready to do a prison project in Missouri, with
Oh.
between a funeral home, a hospice, and a prison. And because
Oh.
this particular prison had hospice services, and so regardless, here's my whole thing: regardless if you are in prison, you are homeless, you are the elite of the elite, doesn't matter.
Nope.
Everybody has a story to tell,
Yep.
and that's kind of what we were saying is, let's let people tell their stories
Yeah.
regardless of the circumstances that they're in. And so that was one that I was really, really looking forward to working on,
Yeah.
but it didn't come to fruition because of COVID, and then I took a different job.
Yeah. Super cool. Super cool. Then that led you to where you are now with the Iowa Funeral Directors. So,
Actually, it didn't. It
no,
didn't.
of course, we had another stop on the way. How dare I?
So, at some point, well, it was in 2020 again, right when we were kind of the thick of COVID. I had received, I had been had a conversation with Jay Dodds from Park Lawn, and in April of 2020, they offered me a job as their director of people development, and I accepted the job. And I knew that it was, a great company, great for my career and the things I wanted to do to grow,
Yeah.
and I wanted to do more. And this was a great opportunity for me. So, but it also required me moving from the great state of Iowa
Yeah.
to the second great state of Texas. And so I moved to Texas and moved to Houston in 2020, which was quite the experience.
Hmm.
Moving in, when you're pretty limited. And
Yeah.
I was with them for 2 years, and I loved my job, fantastic people. I always say, I don't know if I will have better friends than the ones that I met in Texas.
That's great.
Fantastic group of people, and I miss working with them. Uh, just got to work with a lot of great people, Jay and Matt Forestieri, and some of those guys just really helped to kind of expand my knowledge in funeral service, and
Sure.
I'm grateful for that. I got to do a lot of training, and which was great. And one of the best things that I trained for them was through Arbinger, called the Outward Mindset, and that one was near and dear to my heart. And but I woke up one day and I had come back to Iowa, and I was like, oh, I miss home, and I
Yeah.
miss my kids. And
Yeah.
even though they're adults, and I don't need to be on their doorstep, I just missed my kids,
Yeah.
and I wanted to come home. And I I made the decision to come home, and very shortly after that I was offered this job, and that's how I got back to Iowa.
How perfect.
Yeah.
I know we touched on it, or before we were actually recording. I know you have a special project that you're working on with the Iowa Funeral Directors Association. I would love to hear a little bit about that for our audience. I think they're going to love it. Super cool. Let's hear it.
Yeah. So one of the things when I started, I came back and I took this job, and there was really no playbook. So I'm looking at everything and going, okay, what am I going to do, and what do I have to do? And came across a couple of totes in the back room that had a lot of newspaper articles and things in it, and videotapes, VHSs, if you can imagine. And I started looking at them, and it really kind of jogged my memory, because I do remember this. It was um, articles from the United Flight 232 crash that happened on July 19th of 1989.
Okay.
And I, I was like, oh gosh, I do remember that.
Uh-huh.
I was younger, but I do remember that.
Yeah.
And so I just started reading a lot of the articles, looking at a lot of the pictures, looking at the videos. But the articles are what kind of stood out to me more so.
Sure.
Was there was a lot of talk about how important this organization was, or this group of people was, or they interviewed these people and these people.
Yeah.
But there was nothing about our 125 funeral directors from 80 different funeral homes that volunteered their time, their services, products, whatever it was, with no expectations,
Yeah.
other than to say, I'm going to step up to the plate and do this. And I'm reading through this, and one of the funeral directors in 5.5 days was there for almost 122 hours.
Wow.
And so I'm reading this, and there's just nothing mentioned. Like, the funeral directors are completely kind of glossed over, and it broke my heart, because there was 183 people on that plane, and 111 of them died in the crash.
Jeez.
There was one that died the next day in the emergency, or in the hospital.
Yeah.
But there's 111 people that have to be embalmed and put in a casket and shipped to. These people weren't from Sioux City, Iowa. These people were from all over the
Right.
country.
And probably
And
in
so,
very compromised condition, I would say.
yes.
Yeah.
And so who does those things? It's the funeral director. It's not
Yeah.
the Red Cross. It's not the Air National Guard. As fabulous as those people were,
Yes.
and the funeral directors had a lot of praise for, especially the Air National Guard. Um, those funeral directors gave of their time, and they have never been thanked or recognized, or had anybody say, I can't imagine how that affected you.
Yeah.
And because I think the general consensus, if you talk to somebody, especially outside a funeral service, is, well, you're a funeral director, so death is your thing. It shouldn't bother you. And
Golly.
and it does. And to walk into a situation where you are seeing this mass casualty with 111 people deceased, that you have to help identify, they need autopsies, potentially they have to be embalmed, they have to get into a casket, they have to get to the right location.
Yeah.
That's what the funeral director does.
Right.
Now, to me, that's a secondary thing as to what a funeral director does, but it is still crucial.
Yep.
And this, we're talking 1989. There's no DNA. Everybody's buried. Cremation was not. I don't know if any of them were cremated. Maybe there were, but eventually. But they all. So Batesville brought in 111 of the same caskets.
Wow.
And everybody was casketed. It got to either Sioux City, Sioux Falls, or Omaha to be flown out. Anyway,
Wow.
um, so these funeral directors come in, and I just felt like it's going to be 35 years right before our convention, or right after our convention, I should say.
Uh huh.
How can we um, how can we honor them? How can we recognize them? There, out of that 125, there's probably close to at least a third, if not more, that are deceased. And I'm looking at the list, and I know a lot of these funeral directors,
Yeah.
and we may not they may not have a lot of time left either. And then the
Sure.
thing that really struck me was there was one individual that went over there, and she was an intern at the time.
Wow.
And I'm like, how can how
That's
could that have
tough.
negatively potentially affected her view of funeral service?
Yeah.
So
The whole
goes
career,
over
right?
there. Here you go. You're in your mass casualty experience
Good luck.
as an intern.
Yeah.
That could have deterred her, but it didn't. I think she just
Amazing.
retired just a few years ago, actually.
Wow.
And so I just said, I think this is something that I want to do, and I don't know how to do it, but I'm going to try. And so I started reaching out to all the funeral directors and said, would you be a part of doing an interview so that we could show that during our banquet at our convention in 2024?
Yeah.
And we want to honor you. We want to recognize you. We want to thank you. And nobody has said no so far. Everybody has agreed to be interviewed. So we're starting interviews in a couple of weeks. And Funeral Directors Life, I happen to know somebody there, and they said, let us help. And I've had a few more people say, we know this isn't going to be an inexpensive project. Let us
Yeah.
help. And um, had a lot of offers. So that's what we are in the middle of, is starting to do interviews and put together what we hope to be a very meaningful tribute to those funeral directors that gave of their time and their service, and all that stuff. So that's I am really looking forward to do that for them,
Yeah.
because again, when you read the articles, you just kind of go, what? There's no mention of a funeral director in any of this,
Wow.
and yet they were there.
Yeah. It's so
So
unbelievably touching that you're doing that, and just to do that for those people and even the families of the funeral directors if they're no longer with us too. I bet you that'll mean a lot to a lot of people, and even the people probably that were on that flight and their families. Like that's gonna be a very touching thing. So I think that's just so beautiful, and something that not a lot of us funeral directors can even imagine, because not that many of us have been in a situation where there was a mass amount of deaths at one short period of time. So it's a very challenging thing. Like our job is challenging to begin with. That is a different level, and for you to come this many years later and recognize them is just so beautiful. And I think it's gonna mean the world to all those people. And I think even just funeral directors in general, just to get that level of recognition, it means a lot, because we are a lot of times unsung heroes behind the scenes of a lot of different situations. And what you're doing is just, it's so nice. I love to hear it.
yeah. Well, thank you, Mike. I think I I come at it from just a very different perspective, and
Yeah.
I see how hard you all work, and that you give. You know, it's not a I'm lucky. I can go to work 8 to 5 Monday through Friday,
Yeah.
and that's not what you all do. And we hope and pray that we never have to be a part of something that tragic and that big,
Yeah.
but we just don't know.
True.
Um, and so that next day, our first session of the day on Wednesday will actually be a panel of individuals that have been through mass casualties as a funeral director.
Wow.
And so that and we'll have a moderator with questions and things like that. So we really want people to understand that, hey, you may never be involved in something like this, and we hope you're not.
Yeah.
But we see so much more, but maybe not in a way of a plane crash, but we see it in other areas that
Right.
I just want to make certain that the public, the people out on the other
Yeah,
side see the value of a funeral director, and
absolutely.
that this, just because we're in the death care industry, doesn't mean that we get used to it, or that it doesn't hurt, or that we don't have our own struggles. And you have fire departments and police departments that have debriefings after tragedies, and funeral directors don't.
No,
There's no debriefing.
no.
And so that's one thing that I have started to do, is we're reaching out to fire departments and police departments to ask them to include funeral directors in their debriefing, because they're
Great
there with
idea.
them. They're
Yeah,
there with and maybe they don't need it, but some of these young kids, you come in as a new funeral director, and if especially the gal who was an intern, you come in and that's your first experience, boy, you probably need somebody to talk to.
no kidding. Yeah,
And so I'm just really grateful for the funeral directors
yeah,
that have um, offered to be a part of the interview process, because they're coming from all over to be a part of this.
yeah.
And I just hope that they know, um, at least how much I appreciate them, but how much a lot of us do.
Mhm.
Um, they just don't get told enough. They get told with the family, oh, it's a great service, you did a great job, and that's wonderful. But we forgot to do it when it probably was needed most.
Oh, well said, and that's just a perfect mic drop for us. Just your career has been unbelievable, and I love that people are going to be able to see that there's so many different ways that you can be involved in funeral service and to help make a difference in so many people's lives. And we can see that's what you have done throughout your career so far. And it's just really touching and beautiful. And we appreciate you doing all that for the funeral directors that have been in that situation, and then everything that you've done for all these families. It's extremely touching, and just we just love to hear it, and we appreciate everything that you do. And the world's a better place when we have people like you. So thank you so much for taking the time and just giving us your knowledge today.
Hey, Mike, I appreciate you guys, asking me to be a part of this. And I am incredibly grateful for all the opportunities that I've been given in my life, and
Yeah,
the people that I've been able to work with, because each and every one of them have touched my life and made me better at what I do, and still have a lot of growing to do and a lot of things I want to get done. So, maybe we'll meet up here again
love to hear it. That
and
was
go